Today's session is actually a very exciting one. It's about the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. My name is Janeri Mendoza Farjan, and I'm the Senior Program Coordinator here at the Office of Global Learning Initiatives. Now, our Tuesday Times Roundtable is the Office of Global Learning Initiatives flagship discussion series that brings together multiple perspectives on current global issues and trends while we foster meaningful conversations on topics that align to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. If you would like to learn more about the Tuesday Times Roundtable, you may visit our website at go.fiu.edu/TTR. Also, please take a moment to sign in for today's session. You're going to see also this form in the chat. This is going to be the form that we're going to be utilizing to report your attendance. Either you're here for honors college engagement points, global medallion, extra credit for your professor, whatever brought you to us. We're just happy that you're here. I want to also give a special thank you to our graduate assistants, Natalia and Jitangeli, from our Office of Global Learning. They're going to be monitoring the chat and also capturing all those questions that you may have throughout the presentation so we can bring them to our panelists for the day. All right, so if you would like to learn more also about the programs that we have in the Office of Global Learning, and this includes the Global Learning Medallion Program, the Peace Corps Prep Program, Millennium Fellowship, scholarships and fellowships, you may also go to our website, goglobal.fiu.edu/students, or come to one of the peer advising office hours on Wednesdays from 10 to 12 o'clock. Office hours are available in person and also virtually as well. Today's session is connected to an article that we always like to bring so you can continue the discussion. So if you would like to learn more or read the article, you may go to go.fiu.edu/TTR1112. This is because FIU has a partnership with the New York Times, so everyone with an FIU email gets access to the digital access to the New York Times. You may activate your account by going to accessnyt.com. Also, the session is aligned to SDG number 3, good health and well-being, by ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for everyone and all ages. If you would like to learn more about the indicators and also the targets in progress of this goal, you may visit go.fiu.edu/SDG. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Nayade Caldes. She's the Miami Co-Group Leader at Results. Nayade is one of the 2024 Miami Group Leaders at Results, and alongside Karine Burry, who is also the Grassroots Impact Member and Regional Coordinator for Results. They're both going to be moderating today's session. Nayade started with this organization 3 years ago to help to create an impact on the community by working with our government to influence domestic and global policies that ultimately help advance good health, equity, and diminish poverty. Results organizes community efforts and leads advocacy campaigns to influence policy changes at local and national levels. And their impact has successfully mobilized community members and engaged policymakers, resulting in significant government pledge to global initiatives. Welcome, Nayade and Karine, to today's TTR. I will turn it over to you now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here. Karine's going to pull up the PowerPoint in just a second so we can get started.
Right. Can everyone hear us okay? All right. So I'm happy to kick us off. Good afternoon, everyone. We're super excited to be with you all today, and especially excited to talk to you all about the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria, as well as in generally global health advocacy. My name is Corinne Burry, and as Janeri mentioned, I'm part of Results' Grassroots Impact Team, and I'm joining you today with our Results Miami group leader, Nayade Caldes. So first, I'd like to share a little bit about me. I am a Panther, so I'm very excited to be here. I graduated from FIU with a master's in international business in 2008. And in 2016, I joined Results as a volunteer with our local Miami group chapter. Later, during the pandemic in 2021, I joined the staff as a manager on the Grassroots Impact Team. And what led me to advocacy on poverty is that being a first-generation immigrant from Haiti, I've seen firsthand the impact of abject poverty, and I believe that we can address it through just policies, which can provide access to health, education, and economic opportunity to the most marginalized, especially in countries with histories of colonialism and exploitation. We must address poverty as well in our own communities and our country in general through advocacy, through policy changes and advocacy. With that, I'll pass it over to our group leader, Naya.
Hi everyone, I'm Naya. And just to add a little bit more about me, I'm also a Panther. I graduated in 2021 with a bachelor's in biological sciences and then returned a year later to complete a graduate certificate in molecular and biomedical sciences. I joined Results 3 years ago as a volunteer and a fellow, and since then I have become the group leader for our Miami section. So what led me into advocating for poverty? Much like Karin, I'm a daughter of immigrants coming from a low-income country, and much of my life revolved around seeing my family members suffer because of the lack of health resources in their country, and even sometimes here in America, unfortunately. So the well-being of my family and my community continuously propels me to continue addressing poverty with our Congress and our government. So I'm going ahead and going to pass it back to Karin so she can give you a little more introduction on what we do and what Results is.
Thank you, Naya. Results is a nonpartisan advocacy organization where grassroots volunteers led their time to engage with members of Congress on legislation to alleviate poverty. Results was founded in 1980, and since its founding is a proven approach in being a catalyst for change. Results' policy team based in Washington, D.C., researches the root causes of poverty along with proven solutions to address them through policy and funding initiatives with our members of Congress. My team and I support a network of over 500 volunteer advocates and nearly 70 groups across the United States. And together we push for policies that dismantle poverty and inequity in the US and globally. And at Results, we believe that poverty cannot end while oppression still exists. Therefore, our values are rooted in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Since its founding, Results has mobilized over $200 billion in anti-poverty efforts. We advocate by developing relationships with our members of Congress, regardless of whether or not we voted for them. They work for us in a sense because we're their constituents, and it's up to us to hold them accountable to support legislation to alleviate poverty. We do so by writing to and meeting with House representatives as well as senators. We also write letters to the editor and other opinion pieces in various publications. Over time, the full network of volunteers has had over 6,500 meetings with members of Congress, over 23 congressional terms since 1980, has published over 16,000 opinion and media pieces, and has had over 168,000 engagements with members of Congress through meetings, letters, phone calls, and even virtual meetings like this one. Here we have a photo of our volunteers from the Miami group advocating in June 2022 with Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, who is the chairman of our House Foreign Operations Subcommittee of Appropriations. And this is the committee that decides where our tax dollars go to fund for foreign aid programs. Now, this is a common question. Why do we spend so much on foreign aid? Foreign aid is critical, but it's often contested. And it's a myth that by cutting foreign aid, we would balance the US federal budget. Past reporting from several organizations, one of which is Concern US, has shown that Americans think that we spend about a quarter of our national budget on foreign aid. On average, foreign aid spending accounts for just over 1% of our full federal budget each year. Last year, it was just 1.02%, with $63 billion spent on assistance out of $6.13 trillion. And if we divided that amongst every American, it would average out to $188 per person for the year. Our very own Senator, Marco Rubio, who is now on a pathway to becoming our Secretary of State, stated in a 2012 speech that we don't have a national debt because of foreign aid. And if you zeroed out foreign aid, it would do nothing for the debt, but it would be devastating, and not just to the world, but to America's role in it. To share a little bit more about what this means for programs that we advocate for, like the Global Fund, I'll pass it over to Naya.
Yes, so we're going to start off with watching a 2-minute video on what the Global Fund is and the impact that it's had on low-income countries. So I'm going to give Karina a moment to share that video with everyone.
The Global Fund partnership has saved 65 million lives.
But our work fighting HIV, TB, and malaria doesn't just save lives. Amazing as it is, it does so much more.
It ensures that children can go to school, adults can go to work, parents can become grandparents, communities can grow and prosper.
Health workers have more time and hospitals have space to tackle new health threats, prevent people from getting sick, and guarantee life-saving care when people need it most.
Economies get stronger, communities have a voice, a seat at the table.
To break down barriers to good health, safety, and equality.
From the economy to education,
to climate-resilient health systems, fighting HIV, TB, and malaria,
helps lay the foundation for people to live healthy and productive lives. The story is not finished. Crises like climate change, conflict, and human rights violations threaten everything we have achieved.
But we don't stop when things get difficult.
We do more. We fight harder.
We fight harder.
We fight harder.
We fight harder.
The Global Fund partnership stands strong.
Led by countries and communities.
Adapting to challenges we face and fighting for a future
free from AIDS, TB, and malaria.
Okay, so that was a little bit about the 2-minute video, and I hope you found it as inspirational as I do. Karim, can you go to the next slide, please? And so pictured here is Kofi Annan. He's the former Secretary General of the United Nations, and he was a central figure in the creation of the Global Fund. When many people thought he was dreaming, Kofi was among the first donors to the Global Fund and lobbied world leaders to help create his dreams a reality. And he's quoted saying, "When I first mooted the idea of the Global Fund, people said I was dreaming. I love dreams. It always starts with a dream." And he's a great inspiration because it helps remind us that even our dreams can become reality if we fight hard enough. Next slide, please. So we're gonna kind of go back in time to how the world was pre-Global Fund. So we're gonna look at 3 diseases: the AIDS epidemic, tuberculosis, and malaria. So how was the AIDS epidemic pre-Global Fund, 2002, and before? So as we know, the AIDS epidemic devastated entire community and generations. And as a matter of fact, right before the Global Fund was created in 2002, AIDS became the leading cause of deaths worldwide for everyone 15 and up. It broke apart families and communities all over. And it's very well known that there was and kind of still is stigma against the disease and speaking out. So I have a question for everybody. If you can answer in the chat, can anyone tell me what were the 2 most highly stigmatized groups associated with this disease? Yeah, so that is true. It was the LGBT community, and on top of that, intravenous drug users. And at the time, we had an administration that offered a slow and ineffective response to this epidemic, partly due because of the stigma against these groups and the disease. And in the past, there's even been previous administration quoted poking and making fun of these groups and the disease. And even now, when we have become more comfortable in speaking out about this disease, there's still a lot of stigma around AIDS. Many people feel embarrassed by the backlash of letting their families and physicians know about the disease, that they put off their clinical visits and necessary treatment in order to avoid having to openly talk about it. And finally, one of the things that isn't talked about as much either is that it left many children orphaned. When one parent acquires AIDS, it can be sexually transmitted to another parent, and without proper care, AIDS will kill you. And unfortunately, up to date, this disease has left around 15 million children orphaned. Next slide, please. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about tuberculosis and how it was pre-Global Fund. So this one's a little bit interesting to talk about, because tuberculosis is not only a cause of poverty, but a result of poverty. And can somebody tell me why that is? Why is there a disease that can both cause poverty and be a result of poverty? And no guess is wrong, so whatever you think it might be, you can just drop it in the chat below. Yeah, so medical bills is one of them. That's fantastic. When people are sick, they cannot work, poor sanitation, and lack of access to clean water. These are all correct answers. So to start off, poverty increases the risk of tuberculosis because in low-income countries, there's a lack of basic health services, poor nutrition, and you're consistently working in poor ventilated living and work conditions. Also, in low-income countries, you live in households with a higher family size than normal. And all of this creates an ideal environment for tuberculosis transmission, which we know is airborne. So by speaking, talking, sneezing, coughing, and even singing, if you have tuberculosis, you can transmit it to your close ones around you. But now, how does tuberculosis increase poverty? Well, it increases poverty because people, especially the breadwinners of the family, who become sick lose an average of 3 to 4 months of work time. This is 30% of their annual household income that can be lost when you acquire tuberculosis. And not only is the loss of income already a huge burden, specifically in low-income countries, you're also racking up medical bills, which adds to the increasing debt. And on top of that, you're also putting other family members that might be working at risk as well. So there's even more income and more medical expenses being racked up. Next slide, please. And so now we're going to talk about malaria. So a very quick question, and I feel like this is a very probably known answer. Does anyone know what insect transmits malaria? Mosquitoes, yes, that's right. Specifically, and I can't pronounce this right, but the Anopheles mosquito. Now I want you to imagine that you live in a third world country with a warmer environment that are home to these mosquitoes. You have little to shield you, and because they're such tiny mosquitoes, these countries become prey to this disease. As a matter of fact, malaria was the leading cause during this time for death of children and pregnant women, specifically in poor countries, mostly because young children lack the developed immunity, and while pregnant women experience hormonal changes that weakens their immunity as well. Many families in low-income countries are unable to protect themselves from the mosquitoes that spread the disease, and they lack access to the medication. Although, as we probably know, there were numerous attempts to eradicate the control of the spread of malaria, many of the existing programs were considered inadequate and unable to address the needs of the people with malaria, mostly because of lack of resources and lack of funding for these programs. Next, please. So you might be asking, why did the Global Fund specifically focus on these three diseases? Because they're preventable and they are treatable. And they are the cost of injustice and needless deaths globally. Next, please. These three preventable diseases were taking countless of lives and ripping families apart every day all across the globe. And finally, in 2001, during the G8 summit, which is a summit consisting of the 8 most influential world leaders, the Global Fund was finally endorsed and started fully operating in 2002. And as of now, the Global Fund is the best tool to get back on track against those three diseases. So another question we might be asking, well, how does the Global Fund execute their mission? So we have to remember that the Global Fund is a worldwide partnership where world leaders are going to meet at a conference every 3 years to pledge a specific amount of money to last the following 3 years. After that, countries in need of assistance take the lead in determining how and where to best fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and they tailor their plan and response by taking into consideration their political, cultural, and epidemiological context. The Global Fund then reviews the plan that these countries have made and approves them. After the approval, local healthcare workers, government, and community experts are elected to lead the program in their countries and communities. In the background during this time, the Global Fund is going to be providing oversight and making sure that their plan can become a success. And this has led to millions of lives saved and success in low-income countries. Next slide. So now we're going to pass it on to Karin to talk a little bit more about the impact that the Global Fund has had on healthcare systems.
Thank you so much, Naya. Before we get started, I did see that there was a question in the chat by Djerva Levy. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I apologize if I did not, regarding how the Global Fund chooses which diseases to combat and what the process is. And I hope that was answered. If not, let us know. But as Naya explained, at the period of time that the Global Fund was founded, these were the three diseases really which devastated so many lives, particularly HIV/AIDS at the time, tuberculosis, which as everyone really clearly answered, I think we have a really wise group here, is a cause of and a driver of poverty for the reasons that were shared in the chat, as well as Naya explained. And malaria in particular has been devastating, even as we see the onset of climate change and vector-borne diseases spread by mosquitoes. So these, in a sense, were decided to be the diseases that of which we found we were able to increase treatment for, that we would make the biggest impact in terms of number of needless deaths. I hope that answers your question. And if not, we will have a time at the end for Q&A as well. So as Naya shared, I'll share a little bit about a recent report released by the Global Fund in September, which has shown the impact. So at results, we like to talk about results. So as I mentioned, in September, the Global Fund released a report of key results through last year, through 2023. I wanted to take a moment to highlight the impact in the last year up to 2023, but also highlighting what the numbers were as reported in 2020. There are many challenges, as you can all imagine, faced during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I wanted to highlight these numbers just to compare how much was accomplished in the 3 years as we went through the pandemic. As of 2020, 44 million lives were saved in support of treating AIDS, TB, and malaria. However, as reported in 2023, we had an increase of 21 million lives saved over those next 3 years, bringing the total to 65 million lives saved. Broken down by each area in the disease. So in 2020, it was reported that 21.9 million people were placed on antiretroviral therapy for HIV. 4.7 million people were treated for TB, and 188 million treated mosquito nets were distributed to help combat the spread of malaria. And as reported last year, we had an increase of 3 million people on antiretroviral therapy for HIV. So this was increased to 25 million, 7.1 million people treated for TB, so an increase of 2.4 million, and 227 million mosquito nets were distributed, an increase of 39 million. So the Global Fund's investments in these three diseases, which is a total of $66 billion distributed to over 100 countries, has been used and is one of the most powerful tools in reducing global health inequity. Winning the fight against the three diseases is what we believe and why we support Global Fund, to put us on a pathway towards eliminating health inequity. This chart actually shows a clear representation of the progress in combating the three diseases over time. The red line following the progress with HIV/AIDS, the blue line follows the progress on tuberculosis, and yellow over malaria. So I wanted to highlight, I have this part circled to show a significant drop in the blue line regarding the treatment and preventions on tuberculosis. And please feel free to share in the chat if you can venture a guess as to why the sudden why the sudden drop and increase following this decline in 2020. I'll give folks a moment to answer in the chat. COVID, exactly. COVID definitely caused the drop, specifically around TB. And can anyone venture as to why this suddenly went up in that year following? So 21, 22, and 23. No more quarantine, rising temperatures. These are all good answers. The answer is actually advocacy. So I wanted to highlight that the diagnostic tools and treatment for TB, as it's also a respiratory disease similar to COVID, was followed very closely. And in many places that had a higher instance of TB, particularly multi-drug resistant TB, and were considered the high burden TB countries, resources that were combating TB were diverted to treat COVID-19. This is what caused the drop because people were not getting treated, people were quarantined at home, as folks mentioned, and of course the resources were diverted away from that. Resolve and several other coalition partners, including Friends of the Global Fight, Partners in Health, CARE, some organizations that you may know of as well, put pressure on their country governments, not only the US, but globally, to ensure that the commitment we made to ending TB would be happening by rediverting funds back to put us on track to ending TB. So key coverage so the answer there was advocacy. The coverage of key treatment and prevention for interventions for HIV/AIDS, TB, and malaria in countries where the Global Fund invests has significantly increased since its founding due to advocacy. In 2023, 78% of people living with HIV were on antiviral therapy. This was up from 22% in 2010. TB treatment coverage increased and reached over 70% in 2022. And the percentage of population with access to long-lasting insecticide-treated mosquito nets preventing malaria reached to 57%. I also wanted to highlight where you could find country-specific data because this is often a common question. And one of the strengths of the Global Fund is the transparency and the tracking of funding and the impact to highlight the correlation when we advocate to members of Congress. So there's a site called the Global Fund Data Explorer, which is a great tracker and accountability tool. You can find country-specific data and resource mobilization data from the government, from several governments, private sector, as well as NGOs, non-government organizations, other donors, highlighting the pledge and contributions. So we could share the link for that in the chat if folks want to explore. And with that, I'll pass it over to Naya to share how we're now faced with an upcoming opportunity to continue to support the Global Fund.
Yeah, so as Karin had mentioned, if you want to get involved, the best way to see results is through advocacy. And as we already know, in 2025, we're going to have a new incoming Congress, new House of Representatives, new senators, and as everyday constituents, you and I, with hopefully a passion to make the world a better place, we should encourage our new Congress to continue their support for the Global Fund. The replenishment of the Global Fund lasts around 3 years. In 2025, this will be the last year of our 7th replenishment. And by the end of 2025, world leaders are going to meet at a new conference to sort of plan out the next 3 years of replenishment. So our hope is that the United States continues its support and that we have a dedicated and passionate group of advocates to make sure that we let our Congress know why this is important and why should they continue their support. And the last thing that I kind of want to say is that really anyone can make a difference. We really believe in the power of advocacy to make a long-term change. If this isn't an issue that you're passionate about, but there's other issues that you're passionate about, we encourage you to find an organization which advocates on those issues. If you would like to learn more about the work that me and Karim do at Results or learn more about our local Results Miami group, I'm gonna drop a quick link in the chat in a bit that you can fill out so you can get ready for the next steps if you'd like to be a part of that. Next slide, please. And that is our presentation for today. If you have any questions, please let us know and we will do our best to answer them. And I have the Google form on the chat if you'd like to fill it out.
Right, so we encourage you to use the chat feature or the raise your hand features you would like to engage or have any questions for our panelists for today. If one question that I wanted to ask you is on the challenges, right? Because there is so much need around the world, and what do you consider that are those challenges that Global Fund has to face on a regular basis in the effort to fight for these diseases?
It's an excellent question. I was giving pause. I don't know if Naya wanted to answer, but I'm happy to jump in. Part of the challenges that we're facing, as you could see, just geopolitically, how the dynamics of the world is changing. However, it's important for us to continue to engage with our country governments to ensure that we're making the proper investments. And an example of this, in the last replenishment, the US had committed a total of $6 billion to support the fund. And this was through, as I mentioned, just a coalition of organizations, country governments, and making sure that those investments happened. However, as a policy, because the US is limited to only contributing 1/3 of the total amount that's contributed for the Global Fund. Although the administration had set a commitment of $2 billion per year in that 3-year period, it actually dropped less the second year because we weren't getting the total amount from other countries to do their part. So essentially the total fund kind of dropped a little bit lower. And just as I mentioned, this shifting dynamics geopolitically, other priorities coming up, other administrations coming in that may not be as supportive, presents challenges to make sure that we can continue to sustain the funding and combat those 3 diseases as mentioned. I also mentioned briefly earlier climate change. So just the increase in drug-resistant diseases, for example, even with malaria, it's getting really stronger in terms of the type of treatments and what we can use to address it. So with that comes increased research, increased costs, and other things of that nature. So that's just highlighting some of the challenges that we face specifically around Global Fund.
I had a question too quickly. Couldn't admit my. So you showed us the data on like how many millions of lives were saved, and I'm interested in how you get those numbers. Like, how do you actually know how many lives were saved? Like, how is that reported back?
This is a great question. I was hoping we actually do have some time to kind of walk through the Data Explorer. As I mentioned, one of the strengths of the Global Fund has been the transparency in like saying if we're mobilizing or pledging X number of dollars over time, what does that look like? Where did the funding go, right? So I'm actually going to start this from the front of it because I had gone to this page. So this will give an idea of like the total investment amounts. And then here you have some research that can be done specific, that are country specific or grant specific. So it's really the job of countries on the ground in terms of measuring what they've been able to do with the impact and the prevalence of those diseases specifically in their country. Hence the strength of the partnership. It's really multilateral, not only in the funding, but how it's executed on the ground, either by civil society, ministers of health in the specific countries that are receiving the funds. So the data is really coming from there. And then this is just a good way to, it has Kenya as an example. I think I was doing some research like on Peru, what that looked like. So if you were to do a search, if folks can see my screen. There we go. I didn't click the right button, of course. it gives you the detail down to who's the portfolio manager, what is the organization that's collecting the data, or that's receiving the funds in order to fund the specific diseases. What portion specifically of US dollars had gone to it, which diseases. So I hope that answers some of your question. I think in the sense of like lives saved, because you're thinking like this is theoretical. If X number of lives were coming into the world, how would we do this? So it's really just a tracker coming specifically from ministers of health and other organizations and countries in the ground.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I saw a question in the chat by Abigail, which says, what methods do you recommend to advocate within our community, our communities? And that's a great question. A method that I like to do a lot, and I feel like people don't know you can do this, is calling your mayor's office, calling your representative's office. You think that you can't, but you can. Anybody can. Their office is open to any of their constituents, and leave a voicemail or leave a little elevator pitch of issues that you care about. And they do listen to that, and they do have to get back to you as long as you leave an email or a phone number. And then through media as well. So I write a lot to our newspapers. I know it seems very outdated, and my monitor closed for a second, so I'm sorry. Okay, I'm back. I know it seems very outdated, but our Congress and our mayors and people who lead our communities, they read the newspaper. So when you go on there on the Miami Herald and you write a little snippet, a little letter to the editor saying that you care about the Global Fund because of X, Y, and Z, they will read it. And we've gotten some responses from, I don't know if it was Marco Rubio's office, but we've gotten some responses from our letters to the editors where we've been able to set up meetings because of our outreach to the media. So I hope that answers a little bit of your question.
I wanted to add a little bit to Naya's response, and I think that might lead into responding to Desiree's question as well. I think one of the most challenging things is when you see a problem in the world, you think that you're powerless to fix it alone. So the power of doing this through advocacy with an organization such as Results Miami is actually one chapter that's part of a full network of over 70 chapters across the country. Results itself even has global reach, global partners. We have Results Canada, Results UK, and other partners specifically around global health with our Action Secretariat, which partners with other country service providers in 22 different countries in order to strengthen just the power of our voice and making an impact with governments globally and our own US government specifically in investing and taking a stand to end these diseases in particular. And it's kind of what the power of doing this as a group is, because there are times where we're just tired. Like, I feel like I'm making the phone calls and sending the emails, and I would expect an answer back, but I'm not getting them. What do I do? So by doing this as a group, it helps to strengthen our voice and our impact. On the times where we feel like we're not getting our advocacy wins, we have a shoulder to cry on. And when we have a win, we have people to celebrate with. It's just something that, and I can tell you as someone who's advocated, I can't believe it's almost 9 years now, that I've actually seen the incremental change that's happened. And when things shift or like slide back a little bit, we continue to move forward in partnership. So we really believe in the power of doing that, but not only as individuals, but joining together with various groups. As Naya mentioned, if your passion is climate change, this is something that we readily experience in our own committee. We have a chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby here in Miami, and several other local organizations that are working on that. So we definitely encourage you First, to have some self-care as well, because we realize that this could be challenging at times, but if you're fueled to take action by joining an organization to do so.
And then another question that I see here is, does the Global Fund support other countries in person, as in visiting countries, or through legislation? So the way that the Global Fund was made, it was made in mind to have the countries the power to dictate how they want their plans to roll out. So they rely a lot on their local experts and their own people, and they see the best results when it's their own people helping their community improve. So really the Global Fund just likes to raise the money and then likes to let countries be able to execute their own plan. And we're kind of just a helping hand in making sure that that money is raised. But I kind of prefer it that way because it gives local experts a voice, and it gives countries a voice and a hand in helping their own people.
I wanted to address Abigail's question. When I send emails to senators and representatives, I usually get back a response that seems very generic. Do you think these messages are really getting through to our representatives, or is there something more impactful that we could be doing? This is an excellent question. As I mentioned, so and I showed a photo of this earlier, we actually go and set up meetings with offices. We don't always get the chance to meet directly with the representatives. I think that was I think that might have been the last time we met in person with Representative Mauricio Esplart himself, but we have a great relationship with his legislative director, chief of staff, even from the DC and the local office. We feel it's really important to establish relationship even with their legislative aides, because these are essentially the people that make the work happen. They are seeing the policy inside and out. They're connecting with other offices on the policy. So it's important to not only just establish and and reach out to the senator or representative themselves, but also establish the relationship with their staff, because they're actually key in moving the issues forward and almost like developing the advocate while you're away within their staff to continue to move the issue forward. Nayade, do you have a response for that?
Just a little add-on. I remember, I think it was, I don't know where I saw the statistics, but I remember seeing the statistics that one of the most impactful ways to get through to your Congress is by meeting with them. They just want to hear from everyday constituents, and even though sometimes we're in a political climate where that might just not seem to be the case, you know, we had our Senator Rick Scott say yes on CTC, which I thought would never happen, but here he is supporting something that I didn't think he'd support. So you do have wins, sometimes you might not, but the important thing about advocacy is persistence, and resilience, and just keep on going until you get somewhere.
Yeah, the key is to stay the course. So we actually have internally of results. We have an award that we call the PUPO, which stands for persistence usually pays off. And basically just staying on the issue, making it a priority, making it so it's impossible for them not to act on the issue. And again, as I mentioned, we're a nonpartisan organization. We believe the issue is still the issue, no matter who's occupying the seat. So never be deterred by any kind of partisan separation, because at the end of the day, as constituents, we still have a job to engage with them. And they have a responsibility to respond to us as well.
And this is a question that our office always gets from students on how they can support and how they can support results as a student doing their undergraduate degree. They come from different areas or majors. So are there any ways how they can volunteer, support, and also participate in these advocacy efforts?
Yes, of course. So they're always welcome to join our Miami groups. I started off as an undergraduate when I started. I was a senior, so it was a very heavy time for me last year, but I was able to do it. And even though there were days that I just didn't have the time, there were other weeks that I'm like, you know what, I feel like I feel passionate about this. Let me just write out a paragraph and send it out. So if you're interested in joining our group, I'm just gonna go ahead and drop the Google form again. You can fill it out, and me and Karine will reach out to you about our next meeting and how you can get involved with us.
I also wanted to highlight the opportunity of our Results Advocacy and Leadership Fellowship. It's a one-year fellowship program starting January to December, 1 full year. Naya can actually tell you maybe even more in detail because she's been through it. And she's currently in the fellowship class, I think that's graduating in December. And essentially you'll be receiving really supportive coaching. So you'll be applying the advocacy actions like through a local group. So for example, fellowships in the Miami or South Florida area could join in the lobby meetings, learn how to write letters to the editor or reach out to their specific member that they're a constituent of. As well, but you're also tied to a cohort of about 50 to 60 other people that it's really for, I think I've aged out of the fellowship group actually. It's for folks between 18 and 40. I'm 41. I just turned 41 this year, so I aged out. But essentially, you'll be committing to 2 meetings per week where you're getting hands-on advocacy support, more inside information on policy. And it's really a wonderful training, even to carry forward for other issues. We've had fellows graduate from the fellowship and get jobs as working as legislative aides, for example, working with other nonprofits, applying the skills, the advocacy skills that they get in the fellowship to other issues like immigration, climate change, that they're passionate about. So that's another way to also get involved, and we're happy to share that information too.
Yeah, and just to add on with what Karim said, the fellowship, I've done it twice. It really is like somebody's holding your hand, and all of these things that seem so scary and so nerve-wracking, like, oh my God, I got to talk to some legislative staff, like how am I going to do this? They're there to take you step by step and to help make you feel comfortable. And then I think all of the fellows meet once a year for something called Advocating on the Hill, where they fly you out to DC so you can advocate in person with these representatives and senators. So you can really get the full experience of what that's like and get the full experience that, oh, that's right. I'm making a difference. I'm helping make a difference today. So I recommend it.
Thank you so much, ladies, for such a wonderful presentation, and also for creating the awareness on this important topic. I feel that the more we learn how to advocate, the more that we can contribute to these wonderful organizations that are supporting so many people in need around the world. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for engaging to our students as well. And I just wanted to share one last slide before we conclude for the day. So I'm going to share my screen once again. And this is a reminder that next week, we're going to have International Education Week, celebrating International Education Week here at FIU. You may access the calendar of events by visiting go.fiu.edu /IEW 2024. This celebration of IIE is an annual event that showcases the importance of impact for international education, global learning, and cultural exchange across campuses. It is a joint initiative with the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of State. So we encourage all our students to take advantage of being engaged in our activities throughout the week. And last but not least, this is a wrap up. It concludes the end of the Tuesday Times Roundtable for the Fall 2024 series. If you would like to provide us any feedback on what you would like to see in the Spring 2025 series, you may scan the QR code and it will take you to a form where we will appreciate your feedback as well. We look forward to seeing you again next semester, again on Tuesdays. And once again, thank you so much to our panelists for today, Karine and Naya. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to continue supporting in any way we can. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Bye.
Appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.